Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and we have two guests today. We have Ruth Wheeland Myers and Toby Butt, and they represent the oldest company, the oldest existing company in Wadsworth, Allen Hartzell. Now, Ruth, you're retired from Allen Hartzell, is that correct?
That's correct.
But you were there for at least one half of its entire life, 44 years, is that correct?
Yes, that's
and
correct.
there was less than half, but they've been around how many years, Toby?
Since 1875, Caesar.
What's the, if you subtract 1875 from 1987, does that come out to be 112 years or something like that?
122 years.
122 years. We're testing that, Ruth, see if these younger people...
Oh, he's correct. He's correct.
Yeah, we're testing that, Ruth. The reason that we're bringing the two of you on is that, Toby, you're in charge of Allen Hartzell right now, is that correct?
Yes, it is. I'm currently the president.
And Ruth, you were probably one of the older ones, and I'm going to say older rather than the oldest, because we do have some older people than you who are still alive, but they elected to give you information and let you come on since you're one of the young people.
Thank you.
That's right. Well, since we're both exactly the same age, Ruth, you're going to be young all the way through this whole program.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about Toby Butt, first and foremost, so that we can get some the relationships established here, Toby. You weren't born in Wadsworth, were you?
No, I wasn't.
Where were you born?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati, and you came all the way to Wadsworth. And why did you come to Wadsworth? I mean, what was the attraction besides Allen Hartzell?
Well, my family moved here.
That's the attraction.
Moved with my parents a number of times and ended up in Wadsworth in '65 and graduated from high school here.
1965. What did your parents come here to do?
My dad was with Standard Oil Company, the old Ohio.
Oh, and what did he do with them?
He was in road products, oils and such for them. For sales.
Wow. And where did you move to in 1965?
My folks currently live on High Point in the same home they bought at that
place
point.
where they born, or when you came at that time? And you graduated from high school when, Toby?
1968.
A long time ago. That's what, 31 years ago.
Well,
so that makes you what now?
47 currently.
47. Ruth, are you sensitive about your age?
No, not at all.
Tell us when you were born.
1930.
What day?
April 24th.
April 24th, 1930. You were not born in Wadsworth. You came to Wadsworth as soon as you possibly could get here. And where in Pennsylvania were you born?
Somerset, Pennsylvania.
Somerset. We stopped there on our way to see our daughter every single time, both ways, going and coming, because it's the halfway point, the exact halfway point to see our daughter in Newark, Delaware. Ruth, what brought you to Wadsworth?
My family.
Of course, and that's a good thing to do, to follow your family along, but why did they come to Wadsworth?
My father changed jobs. He was a miner and he was injured in the mine, so he came out here and we purchased a farm, which is now Great Oaks area, and we lived there.
I remember the farm that you purchased up there. Who were your neighbors up there when you purchased the farm?
Oh my, I can't remember, except that I know the Square Top was there.
Square Top was there.
Square Top Restaurant.
And who were do you remember the girls or the young men that you associated with when you were living up there?
No, because there wasn't that many people around us. There was
you were
very
just one
few
big
homes.
farm, right?
Yeah.
Whose farm was it? Do you remember?
Boy, that I can't remember.
And do you geographically tell us exactly where the farm was?
Well, where where Larry Haberman and them are now. What's the name of that place? Lomed.
Lomed, right there.
Right there.
And we had, not too long ago, a few weeks ago, we had Tony Solaro, who now owns that. And the farm was there on the corner of Reimer and what is now,
Great Oaks.
Great Oaks.
No.
No, that's not.
No, well, it'll come to us. Yeah. It'll come to us.
Clark Road.
Clark
Road.
Yeah.
Corner of Clark, and you were the southwest corner of that. Is that correct?
Right.
And you didn't have many farms. You didn't have many neighbors there at that time.
No.
And you went to which school?
Wadsworth.
Wadsworth High School. You graduated in Wadsworth High School in what year?
1948.
1948. Now, we have already discussed with many of our other people your age, or maybe a year or so older than you, of the teachers, but is there any teacher that you particularly remember at Wadsworth High School?
Oh, yes.
Who made an impression? Who was that?
Agnes Williams. She was my office practice teacher.
And Agnes Williams was probably, at that time, how many years old?
Oh, I would say probably in her 50s.
In her 50s. And she was hard of hearing, was she not? Hard of hearing. But she was a wonderful, wonderful teacher.
Great teacher.
And this is the person who really set you out in life, is that correct?
She's the one really that got me the job at
Got you the job at Allen Hartzell. And you graduated on what day?
The last day of May.
May 31st.
Right.
When did you start working for Allen
June
Hartzell?
1st.
June 1st. As a matter of fact, you graduated in the evening,
Yes.
and less than 12 hours later, you were working at Allen Hartzell. And you
Correct.
stayed there for how many years?
I can't keep track. It's over 40.
40? And you say 44.
Well, she
Toby.
retired in 1992, so
That's 44 years. That's 44 years. That's a long time.
Yes, it is.
A long time. And a lot of changes have occurred since then at that time. When you first went there, Ruth, who was in the office?
Bannard Coleman, Fred Allen Jr., Marge Coleman,
Now, Marge Coleman was whom first?
Geary,
Marge Geary.
Uh-huh.
And whom did she marry?
Bannard
Leonard
Coleman.
And both of them were widowed.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mrs. Coleman had died several years before, had she not?
I'm not sure really when Mrs. Coleman died.
And Mr. Geary had died earlier too. Now, Mrs. Gary's granddaughter is Kathy Geary.
Right.
Who is the plumber, the only woman plumber.
Correct.
And I surely would like to get her on the program because that's historical in itself. We have a woman plumber in Wadsworth. That's a sexist remark, but nonetheless, that's historical. We never had a female plumber in Wadsworth before. Tell us about the personalities of these people. Let's take Bernard Coleman first and foremost.
Well, the one thing I remember about Mr. Coleman, he was very, very sensitive.
Extremely sensitive.
Very sensitive man, because I'll never forget when I left the first time to have my first child, he didn't have anybody to take care of my job. He called me back, he said, irregardless of what the money is, I want her back. He was just a very sensitive person.
Nice person.
Very nice.
Always low level, never excitable.
Never.
And just as good as gold. And tell us about Marge Geary Coleman then.
Well, she was an excellent secretary,
Top-notch.
fantastic typist, and she had the most beautiful handwriting I think I've ever in my life seen, but she was an exceptional lady.
She surely was, and she worked hard. She had a son who was Stanley Geary, who was the father of Kathy Geary.
Right.
And then, do we know Kathy's other grandparents?
Not that
Chamberlains?
I remember.
Remember the Chamberlains? Yeah,
No,
the
I don't
Chamberlains were
remember them.
Kathy's other grandparents.
No, I don't remember.
So Stan married a Chamberlain girl, and the grandparents were the Chamberlains. Now, tell us a little bit about Fred Allen Jr. And did you remember Fred Allen Sr.?
No, Mr. Allen Sr. was gone before
He was gone
I came
before
there,
you.
yeah.
What about Fred Allen Jr.?
Fred Allen Jr. was another remarkable man. He was very good. I mean, he was very good to his employees, and he had a sense of humor.
Hidden, but it was there.
Yeah, it was there.
Hidden.
Yeah.
He graduated from Western Reserve University.
Yes.
That was one of the things that singled him out at the time, because Western Reserve was an extremely difficult school to get into, and he came out of that with flying colors, and then he took over the agency, which was Allen Hartzell. And his office was where in the old building, or the building that you're in right now?
Directly at the end of the hall.
On the right-hand side?
No, directly at the end of the hall.
Oh, at the end of the hall.
Right at the end of the hall.
Right at the end of the hall. That was Fred Allen's office.
Right, that was Fred.
Tell us some of the things about Fred Allen that would give you the indication that he had a sense of humor, because he was always a very staid person, was he not?
Yeah, most of the time, but he'd come out and just do certain things, maybe write notes on your pad that would, make you laugh.
Make you laugh.
To let you know that he was a caring and sensitive person,
He
that's
was.
all. Yeah.
The whole operation was caring and sensitive.
Very.
And who else was
Very.
working in the office? We have Fred Allen, Marge Geary, Barnard Coleman, and
Grace Storm was there.
Grace
at the
Storm.
time.
And tell us about Grace. Now, she has been in Wadsworth for years and years and years. And
Yeah.
let's start with her looks.
She never changed. She was always
Always
the
And she's a
same.
beautiful woman.
But she was always very neatly dressed. She's a very, very nice lady.
Nice person. Wore her hair how? How would you symbolize?
Mainly with a bun in the back.
Bun in the back.
Uh-huh,
But
yeah.
just a beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful
she was a
woman. And
nice
she had
lady.
two sisters.
Yeah.
And they're all living at the same place, weren't they?
They lived, Idell and Ruth and Grace, they all lived together.
And who was married and who was not?
Grace was the only one that was married, and then her
Right.
husband was struck by lightning.
Right.
Yeah, but the other two, to my knowledge, were never married.
Did she ever talk about her husband's death?
When I first went there, yes, she wanted me to know, what happened to him.
And tell us, what was her story about her husband's death?
Well, he was out in the field with the horses, and if I can recall, she said that he was under a tree and the lightning struck the horse, and I guess the horse killed him.
That's correct. Did she say when it happened?
No, that I can't remember.
She had been did you know, Toby?
I knew Grace had the opportunity to talk with her a number of times, but didn't know this story.
Oh, well, I guess all of Wadsworth knew it,
Yeah.
because, she's been a Wadsworth girl all of her life. What was her maiden name? Do you remember that?
Well, it had to be Donor.
Donor.
Yeah.
And her married name was?
Storm.
Storm, right. And the Storms were a large family, too. As a matter of fact, some of her relatives lived in the Silver Creek area, and they lived at the very, very bottom of the valley. And on the top of the hill, we had the Floods. Kenny Flood, Wadsworth, and his parents. And we used to have the Floods on the hill and the Storms in the valley.
Well, that's interesting.
An interesting little sidelight there that I thought you might want to. And who are some of the other people who were there at the time?
Bob Gaston.
Bob Gaston. Tell us about Bob Gaston's family.
Well, he had twins, that I recall.
He had twin girls,
yeah,
right?
He had twins.
And his wife was Pat Gaston. But what about his mother and his father?
I don't know too much about them. I really don't.
Well,
I've met them, but they weren't in the office very much.
okay, and then beyond Bob Gaston, we had Dale Guiley.
Yeah, Dale Guiley was there.
And Dale's brother was Lewis Guiley. And Lewis Guiley had a gas station in the south end of town. And he had two children, David and, I've forgotten the girl's name. And then Dale Guiley has a son who is also Dale Guiley, right?
Right.
Who is an organist
Right.
at the Christian Church, at the Trinity Church. And what else about Dale Guiley? What else did he do then beyond that?
Not too much. He was a very quiet man. He wasn't.
Well, he left Ellen Hartzell then and joined up with somebody else for.
He went and moved out of state.
But didn't he, before he did that, didn't he have Bates and Guiley Insurance Agency?
You're really taxing my brain. I can't remember.
I think so, I'm not sure. Bates and Guiley, he went with Ed Bates,
Yeah.
and then they moved up there to where the Bates Agency was. I believe that's correct, I'm not positive, but I'm sure we'll find out because we'll get a phone call, and that's fine. We need to get those phone
Yeah.
calls to prepare us for the history, whoever's going to write the history for the year 2000. We aren't all the way out of the woods with personnel there. Who else was there? Some of the secretaries.
There weren't too many secretaries. When I first went there, Dana Miller was there. Dana Dreher.
Dana Dreher Miller.
She was
Mary
there.
Perry Miller.
Right.
Right, and she lives in town yet. I think they live
Right.
on
Right.
Yeah.
Avenue.
West Good.
Right, and Perry Miller is one of probably the dean of carpenters in the
Yeah.
city of Wadsworth, cabinet maker, so he can make absolutely anything. Very, very fine craftsman. And then she had two daughters, right?
Right.
And one of them works for the city for many, many years,
Right.
Monica.
Right.
And then she had another daughter as well. Now, what about Frances Sondels? Was she there at the time?
No, Frances came in first part of 1960, I believe, wasn't it, Toby?
1960.
67 or something
68,
like
somewhere in
that.
that area.
So you were there for 1,000 years before anyone came.
You got that right.
And anybody else there? Can you remember anyone else?
Was Greenie there then or not?
Lois came, I think, before Francis.
Lois Green
Lois Green.
was the wife of Leslie Green, who was a plumber, and also he was he worked for the city as
Right.
an inspector for a while.
Correct.
Right. Anyone else?
Oh. Mr. McMullen.
Mac McMullen, Claude McMullen.
All right, Clarence McMullen.
Clarence McMullen.
Yeah.
Nice person, quiet,
Very.
bald-headed.
One of the nicest people I ever met.
He was a very, very nice person, right. His cousin, Maud McMullen King, then after her husband died, became Maud McMullen King Bittaker, used to teach at Sherman Elementary School where I was principal, and this is many, many years ago, 43 years ago. We're gonna go back to the origins of Allen and Hartzell. When we were growing up, or as a matter of fact, when you went there, what was the name of it, Ruth?
Allen and Hartzell Incorporated.
But what about the Dibble? Was that
I'm
off there
not
by the
sure
time?
when
Allen
Dibble
Hartzell
came
Dibble was
off.
the
1920 is when it became Allen, Hartzell, and Dibble, according to the records I
I'm
have.
not sure when it was.
1920 became Allen Hartzell and Dibble. What was before that, Toby?
Initially, when the agency was founded, it was the Dakin Fire Insurance Agency in 1875.
Do we have any pictures of the Dakin people?
Yeah, there's a couple in here, I believe. Caesar.
Oh, here's Grandpa Dakin. What is Grandpa? Do you know him well enough to call him Grandpa, or?
Well, there's a.
Grandpa Dakin. He was the one who owned it at the time. Is that correct?
That's correct, right? He was the initial.
And then we have Arthur Dakin, who is obviously a son.
Son, correct.
And he probably took over.
That's right.
And this started in 1875.
Our original contract with the Ohio Farmers Insurance Company, which is now Westfield Company, is dated January 1st, 1875.
The original. And you know, here's something I think is extremely interesting. You talked about the Ohio farmers. Here is an insurance policy. And there are three things I think on here that are particularly significant. The first of all, this one is 102 years old, 104 years old, because it was, well, no, wait, it expires on February 2nd, 1893. Now, what does that mean? When was it written?
Probably the year before that.
Okay, and probably February 2nd, 1892, so that would be 105 years old. And it's in perfect shape. I'm almost afraid to touch it. The second thing is that we still have the most beautiful handwriting. Look at that handwriting there. That's just gorgeous. I don't know who wrote it, but whoever it is knew how to write. And the third thing is that the amount for a $2,700 insurance was only $18.90. Is that for a whole year?
Right.
Is that a little bit less than we pay now?
Comparatively, probably. That is signed by Mr. Dakin also, the original J.W. Dakin.
Now, did he sign this? Do you think that he signed it himself?
I believe so.
Well, then Mr. J.W. Dakin had a beautiful handwriting, because he's the one who signed it right there, J.W. Dakin. That's the agent. Well, that's great. And on the inside, it merely says that this is on the dwelling. It says, on the dwelling house number 1 and the furnace, household furniture, clothing and provisions, while therein, and of all things, the sewing machine. That costs $5 extra to have all of the household furniture, clothing, provisions, and the sewing machine. That was put in there. And it was on the, this was written on the 14th day of February, 1888. 1888 at 9:30 at
60.
1888. That's pretty old. Well, that's something that you people really want to. And this also from the Ohio farmers was what? What was this?
Well, they've always had a habit of giving, making calendars available through their agencies every year, and that's one that has never even been unwrapped from 1890,
1886.
86, okay.
1886, so it's 111 years old, never been unwrapped, still has, and it seems so strange. Did you put the cellophane on it?
No.
That's the way it was. There's something on there that I didn't realize they would have had cellophane like that, or whatever that is. It's kind of a plastic cover. But that's the Ohio Farmer's Calendar in 1886. 1886, right, so it's 11 years old, yeah, 1886. And it says here, James C. Johnson is the president, and A.H. Hawley, H-E-W-L-E-Y, is the secretary. And the agent is H.D. Waddell from Hillsboro, Ohio. That's a beautiful calendar. Those are mementos that we certainly want to keep. What else can we tell us about the beginnings of Allen Hartzell and Dibble?
Well, there's a couple of things that come to my mind, and unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet a number of these people. Through Ruth and a number of the other employees, I've heard stories of Fred Allen, and always wished I'd had that opportunity, because I understand that his way of doing business was something I probably would have copied and envied very much. But I think one of the things that's interesting to me when I look at this is, when you talk about a company that's nearly 125 years old, the continuity that's consisted during that period of time, the leadership teams that have been there through those agencies. Now, when I came to the agency in 1975, during our 100th year, Bill Snoke was the president, and I had the opportunity to work with Bill, Dean Eicher, and a number of other insurance people in the community who I had a lot of respect for at that point, and still do to this day. But when I look back through the history and through our corporate minutes, which I've done, it's amazing to me to see the camaraderie that was there. You know, people like a Ruth Myers are tough to find today. You don't find people that stay with a business for 44 years. And that's what made the agency, the people that were there to take care of them.
I have an old adage that I'm a student of administration, taught it at the university level. And there's nothing written in a book, but I always say that you don't administer buildings, you don't administer bricks, you don't administer programs, you administer people. And the only thing that really makes the difference is people. Ruth, just out of curiosity, we're going to come back to this. This is extremely interesting. Would you mind telling us what your beginning salary was? In
$75 a month.
$75 a month in 1948. And we won't ask what your closing salary was, but if it was more than $80 a month, we'll be very happy.
That's right.
And it was. Go back here to Toby and tell us a little bit more about the beginnings here that you have. And I've asked them to take notes because these things are so far back in the past that it's impossible to remember, and there are so many people who are no longer with us. So how about giving us a rundown of the things that you can tell us about the Allen Hartzell Company?
Well, let me give you a couple of dates here, Caesar, that may be helpful. As I mentioned, the agency was started in 1875 by James W. Dakin. It was in the old Myers building, which is currently where the business
the Myers block,
office
so that we can get the geographical location, the northwest corner of the square. Okay.
Right. And Mr. Dakin died in 1906, at which time his son Arthur, who we had a picture of, took over. At that point, our records indicate that a half interest in the business was bought by Lou Allen.
Lewis Allen, who was the grandfather of Fred Allen. Grandfather, not the father, but the grandfather of Fred Allen.
And then in 1908, Stephen B. Hartzell came here from Washington, D.C. to join the firm.
Okay, now then, let's stop there for a second. Ruth, Beatrice Hartzell-Minnick.
Yes.
What relationship was she to this Hartzell?
That was her grandfather.
Also the grandfather. Beatrice Hartzell-Minnick would now be 67 years old. Where's she living? Okay.
And at that point, Art Dakin retired. In 1908, our real estate department began. And that was a start of a whole different dimension for Allen and Hartzell at that point. And as people are well aware, I mean, there's a good portion of this town that was developed through our real estate department, through Dick Krause and some of those folks.
And we need to hear about that too in a couple of minutes, but let's go with the history.
1914, Mr. Hartzell purchased the remaining interest of the agency, and it was incorporated in June of that year, June of 1914, as Allen and Hartzell Incorporated. Mr. Dibble joined the agency July 1st of 1916.
Okay, now which Dibbles are we talking about, Ruth?
Card dibble.
Card Dibble, and who are his children?
The only one I'm familiar with is Dick Dibble.
Dick Dibble, and then
Then there was Ted.
Ted.
Yeah.
Ted Dibble is what?
That would have been a grandson.
Grandson.
Yeah.
And Ted Dibble would be 70 years old now,
Yeah.
approximately.
I have one correction here too. In 1915, backing up a year, Mr. Coleman started at that point.
Barnard Coleman
Right.
started that time. At that time, Barnard Coleman had just come to Wadsworth. Is that correct? Now tell us who Barnard Coleman's children are who are still living in Wadsworth.
Oh, my.
Well, we have Bob Coleman, his son, and we had Liberta Lee, but
Liberta
she's
Lee,
gone.
right.
Liberta Coleman Lee, Cecilia Coleman White, who lives in Florida and who was here this summer, and who are the other ones?
I really don't remember.
But we have three of them, but that we know that are living, that we're positive are living, are two. That would be Bob and Cecilia. Cecilia would well be into her 80s, probably 83, 84. Bob is probably well into his 70s, 77, 76, somewhere in that area. And Bob will probably give us a call, and that's fine, because we'll find out who the rest of them are. What I'm going to do at the end of these programs, we still have many more to go, but at the end of these programs, I'm going to just have a very boring hour or so of making all the corrections on the air so that people will know what those corrections are. Because I have a whole list of them at home that people have written to me and have called on the phone to tell me about them. So if we make a mistake, we'll get it corrected.
Well, and that's one of the things that's interesting to me. When I'm checking our records, I do find some conflicts in there, and I don't have any way of knowing for sure what the actual difference may be in those situations. 1917, Allen and Hartzell moved to its current building at 148 Main
Right.
Street from the Myers building.
And do you remember what the front of the building looked like at the time?
I don't.
Do you, Ruth?
It was pretty much like it's in that picture, I think.
Well, it had a white kind of a, I imagine it was supposed to be marble or something. It was a white, glassy kind of a thing on the front of it. It was very classy looking, very classy looking.
I do believe I have a picture of that somewhere.
Right, I remember that very well, and we'll talk about what happened in 1937 then with Allen and Hartzell.
1918, I'm showing that Mr. Fixler joined the agency.
And that would be, this is the Fixler now, who was not the grandfather, but the father of Tom Fixler. And then this Fixler,
C.C. Fixler.
C.C. Fixler went from there to the Fixler Agency.
Correct.
But he was at first with the Allen and Hartzell. Go ahead, please.
1919, Mr. McMullen joined the agency.
Clarence McMullen.
So in a very short period of time, some real key people came into that agency. From about 1915 through 1919, a number of people that were there and involved with that agency for a long time came into it. 1920, the agency became Allen Hartzell Dibble.
Allen Hartzell Dibble. No and.
Correct.
And we were always told that we could not say an and in Allen Hartzell Dibble. Allen Hartzell Dibble.
1928, it shows that Wadsworth at that point had 5,000 residents. And
1928, I thought that didn't happen until 1931. Or wait, they were incorporated. They became a city in 1931. That's right. So 1928, they had 5,000 residents.
Okay. And interestingly enough, it shows in our records that in 1928, our agency wrote the group life policy covering the employees of the Ohio Farmers Insurance Company. So
They wrote it.
Yeah.
things have kind of flip-flopped over the years.
A little bit. I guess Ohio Farmers writes for everybody now, doesn't it?
Pretty much so. And it's interesting that going back that far, we were a very integral part of that company.
Yes.
1937, it shows that our building was remodeled into a two-floor building. And this was shortly before, well, I guess the fire that occurred in 1940. Early part of 1940, Lou Allen died. And Mr. Dibble took charge until he retired. Fred Allen then took charge in September of the agency.
In 1940.
In 1940.
Fred Allen had graduated from high school in about 1935, 36, somewhere in that area.
My records show that he had joined the agency in March of '39 as the company attorney.
Okay, so that's about right. He was out of college.
And then in November, on the 28th of November, our building burned.
Burned. I remember that as if it were yesterday. It burned throughout the night. In the morning, we were coming in by bus because we lived out in the country. And as we went out School Drive, which is now School Drive, and incidentally, you could go west on School Drive in those days, and you go both directions. Now you can only go east. You can go only east. We were coming out, and as we turned the corner then to go up to the square and then down to Centralized School, we saw all of the firemen there, and the building was just in shambles. And of course, we were shocked. We had never seen a building before that was burning, and it was burning. I mean, it was smoldering or whatever, whatever that fire. But I remember as if for yesterday. I have never forgotten that. And the day was a gloomy day. It was cold, very cold, but kind of rainy. One of those rainy, cold days. It wasn't snowing. It was just a rainy, rainy, cold day. And what day was it? November what?
November 28th.
November 28th of 1940. Yes, I remember that as if it were yesterday.
It's interesting to me. We have some papers from the time period when we were going through the rebuilding and the actual reopening the following fall. The cooperation that our agency must have received from the various tradespeople in the community and such was phenomenal. Everybody seemed to be involved in helping us get back in business as quickly as possible. During the period of time that we were not able to be in that building, we were in the First National Bank building basement.
That's
right
correct.
Up the street.
Up the road from there, up the street from there, that's right. And then when they built it, they put a brick front on.
Correct.
Right.
And somehow, even in those days, I was happier with the brick front than I was with the fake glass or whatever that white was that's on the front there.
Yeah, and in September 26th of 1941, the building was reopened, and the following month we had a grand reopening celebration, which we do have copies of the old papers from then, and it was quite an event apparently.
It was indeed quite an event. The entire city turned out for it. People went, I went to it myself. And I was only a little kid. I was only 10 years old, and I think they gave away things like yardsticks or rulers or balloons or something. And I'm sure I don't have many more, but I remember that very well.
Things haven't changed much, have they?
No, they have not. No, not at all. Then what happened with Allen and Hartzell? Well, some changes here which occurred a little later on.
A couple of notes here. We seem to have a time gap in there from some things happening, but it appears moving forward, actually 10 years, Bill Snoke joined the agency in 1951.
Well, what about before Bill Snoke, about 1947 or 48?
Fred Allen was there up to that time.
Okay, but I mean in terms, it wasn't, what about Dick Krause?
He didn't come till the late 1950s, I think.
Dick came after Bill.
Yeah, he came after Bill.
Bill hired Dick into the agency from a teaching position here in the Wadsworth school system.
Well, I thought that Dick was there in the Fort. I could be wrong.
Bill came in 1951.
Bill Snoke came in
Bill
51.
Snoke came in 1951.
And Dick Krause didn't come until
after
later?
that. Yeah, he came later.
I thought that Dick Krause had come during the time that we were in school.
No,
No? Okay, well, I'm wrong.
no.
Somebody will correct us.
You bet, you bet.
And we'd be happy to know for sure exact dates. Dick apparently is in Florida right now.
That's right, that's why he didn't want to come on the program. He said he did not want to commute 4,000 miles to spend 1 hour here with us, but he said that his thoughts are with us today.
Doesn't know what he's missing.
He doesn't know what he's missing, you're right.
Bill joined the agency in 51, then, Caesar, from our information, and...
Bill Snoke.
Correct.
Right.
No.
And in 1967, or 67, purchased the agency from Fred Allen. So...
But he kept the same title, same business,
name.
same name.
Right.
And rightfully so, because that's a very well-respected name for many, many years. There's a picture here of people who were in the operation about when? What year would that be?
Let me see the picture, may I?
Surely.
That would have been about 1949, somewhere in that area.
1949.
Yes.
Can you tell us who all these people are? I'll help you over here. We have Dana Dreher,
Then that's me, the next
Then
one.
you were
Yeah.
Ruth Wheeland then, right?
Wheeland, yes.
This is Dana Dreher Miller and Ruth Wheeland, and there's Marge Gary.
Yes.
And there's Grace Storm.
Right.
Grace Donor Storm. And then you
Norma
have
Head.
Norma Head. And Dale Guiley.
Right.
Bob Gaston.
Ike Fail.
Ike Fail, I couldn't see him there. And there's Fred Allen. Barney Coleman.
Mr.
That's
McMullen.
Mac McMullen, and then the last one is
George
Cruz. Yeah, we got them all there. And you say that was 1949,
Approximately 49.
about 50 years ago.
Yeah, it was right after I started.
About 50 years ago. And everyone there, just as we remember them in those days, and we haven't seen some of them. Now, let's see who is living and who is not. Dale is
Dale is deceased.
deceased. Bob is living.
Yes.
And Ike Fail is gone.
Right.
And Fred is still with us.
Yes.
Barney's gone.
Fred's deceased.
Fred deceased when?
Did he die?
Yeah.
When did he die?
Probably 5 years ago, down in Naples
I
area.
didn't know
I've been
that.
in town.
Fred's deceased. Barney is dead, and Claude is dead, and of course George is gone. Dana still lives in Wadsworth. You still live in Wadsworth. Marge is gone. Grace is gone, and Norma is
She's still here.
So 50 years we have only 1, 2, 3, 4 left out of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Third of you are still living.
Right.
Great picture, great picture. Tell us some of the things, Ruth, that you remember, the funny things and the sad things and the, shall we say, the scary things.
Oh, there was lots of funny things.
Well, let's hear some funny things, Ruth.
But that's when Ron Smith was with the
Tell us
agency.
about Ron Smith and what he did and what he was like. And
He was a destroyer.
a destroyer.
It's the only word I can use for it. No, he was a good salesman, but he was a practical joker.
Tell us about him.
Oh my goodness, what can I tell you? Put Limburger cheese in the telephones.
He did that. And what did you do when you found the Limburger cheese in the telephones?
What could you do?
Did you know who
Start
did
cleaning
it?
Oh yes, we knew who did
And what did you do to Ron Smith, who was a young boy at the time?
Yeah, well, the real thing I remember about Ron is when he went away for vacation one time. Why, Dick Krause and the bunch of us moved his office out. When he came, came back, there's nothing in the office.
And that's worse than Limburger cheese, isn't it?
It was.
What did he say? What did he do?
He just stood there and looked, he couldn't believe it. Yeah.
His office was gone.
He knew something would happen.
Oh, I would imagine he would. Yeah. Now, he worked for you for how long?
That I can't tell you. 4 or 5 years, maybe, something like that.
Now, he still has daughters in town, does he not?
Yes.
4 of them. And they are all married, probably, are they not? Because
I haven't kept track of them, so I don't know. He has his own agency in Barberton.
right, they would probably be in their 30s now,
Yeah.
would they not? And what about some of the other kind of funny things that happen? Insurance offices aren't supposed to be funny, but Alan Hartzell always had a sense of humor down there. And what other kinds of things happened?
Oh, boy. It's awfully hard to remember. There were so many of them, so many of them.
Ruth, as you went back from 1948, June 1, to the time that you retired, what changes did you find, what changes did you see in 3 different areas? First and foremost, the office equipment. Number 2, the insurance industry itself. And number 3, the personnel.
Well, let me start with personnel.
Okay.
I don't think the personnel really changed that much because in all the years that I worked there, I worked with extremely nice people. They were all very competent.
And who were some of them? We talked about not Martha, but
Frances.
Frances Saunders.
Frances,
Who else?
she was good to work with. Well, there's Louise Bowling.
Louise
She's been
Bowling.
there forever. She's a terrific lady and still at her age is terrific.
And we
Yeah,
won't ask how old she is, but we know that she is
Yeah.
above 70.
yeah, she's still a worker too, a
Yes, she
very
is.
good worker. And boy, it's kind of hard.
But the personnel stayed, didn't they?
Yeah, the personnel stayed
They almost
mainly.
never left.
Yeah. We had, I would say, the minimum time that anybody left was about 5 years, really.
What about Gwen? Gwen Byrne. She worked there.
She worked there for a few years. She married a doctor. A
Dr.
dentist
Caruso.
somewhere. Yes,
From Orville.
Right. And I have lost track of her. I'd have
Well, her
no idea.
mother just died not too long
Oh,
ago.
did she?
Mabel Byrne died not too long ago.
Right.
And did anybody else work there that we can remember? How about any of our other classmates, girls in your classroom, or in your class?
Just Dana was the only one in
You
my
and Dana.
classroom.
And how long
yeah.
did Dana work there?
Dana worked there, oh boy.
Now, Dana was a hot
She
shot
started before I did,
Did
because
she?
she started part-time.
part-time. She was a hot shot secretary.
Yeah, she was good.
Darn good secretary.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, bright girl, all the way through. Very bright person. Always admired her. She was a cheerleader in high school, wasn't she?
I can't remember that.
I think she
either.
was.
I can't
She was
remember
really, really
that.
great person,
Yeah,
very popular.
yeah.
Dana, a very popular girl. Now, what about the office equipment? What about the?
Well, not really too much change. We had typewriters, just
Well, do you
because the
remember the
computers
Verityper?
didn't come in until after I left, huh?
Do you remember the Verityper they had?
That I don't remember.
Verityper was Bob Gaston's office, a Verityper. And a Verityper was one that, there was now you can do it with a computer, and you could change fonts in it and things like that.
Yeah.
And it actually printed out the way that a newspaper would print it, or,
Right.
a printing company would. And what about the, I guess you would call it the automatic machines, payroll machines, or whatever you use those.
Well, there was no automatic payroll machine.
What did
You
you
did it
have?
by hand. You
By
had
hand.
books and everything that was entered, even I think until the time Francis came, most of it was done
By hand.
By hand in the books.
Well, wasn't there were some machines that, an accounting machine, I guess that's what they call it, an old.
We had an old one in that office. I don't know if we still have it or not.
What did
Yeah.
it do? How did you work that?
I didn't work that. That was Lois Green's, and she loved that machine.
And what did it do?
Well, it did the bookkeeping and real estate stuff like that later on.
But it was all manual, it was not
It
computerized.
was all manual,
You
yeah.
had a great big keyboard,
Yeah.
punch buttons and all of that kind of a
Right.
thing. And do you remember when you got your first electric typewriters?
I don't remember the year, but I remember it.
You remember them?
Yeah.
And what did you use before that?
Manual.
What were the requirements? Let's take someone like Marge Geary. What could she do with a manual typewriter?
Fly.
Fly.
She was good. She was.
How many words a minute do you think she could do on a manual typewriter?
I wouldn't have any idea. All I know is she is very fast and accurate.
Very fast and accurate.
Yeah.
She's an excellent secretary. And then what happened when you got the electronic materials coming in, such as electric typewriters? That's not electronic, but the computers. How did that change your whole way of doing things?
On the computers, I don't know anything about because that didn't come in until after I left. Yeah.
No computers until after
No,
you
yeah,
left.
right.
You're gonna have to get Alan Hartzell on the stick there.
We're working on it.
So you never.
No, we always had electric typewriters.
But you never worked with computers then?
No,
And you never typed letters on a word processor or anything like that?
Well, the typewriter was more or less a word processor because you could make multiple copies and things on it, yes.
Oh, kind of a memory typewriter?
Right,
But you didn't go into the computers at
No,
all?
no.
Now, what about the insurance rates? Do you remember when people would come in and they would pay their, and I'll tell you a little story about that in a few minutes of a personal nature.
I remember, yeah, you just had one rate basically for everything.
And what was it?
What was it?
I mean, how much of a rate was it? It was an inexpensive kind of a thing, wasn't it?
Oh, it was very inexpensive because you didn't rate by age, by anything else. It was just rated one basic rate by your territory. You didn't have to worry about ages, but then it got a little bit more complicated each year.
Much more
It went on,
complicated.
yes.
What was say for instance, a home that cost at that time $10,000, which was a lot of money for a
lot of
home, believe it
money.
or not, a lot of
Yeah.
money for a home. How much would it cost to buy insurance for that home for a year?
Boy, I really couldn't tell you. I can't remember.
It was, less than $100.
Oh, yes, it was very minimal.
Very minimal.
Very minimal.
Of course, we didn't have the kinds of things in our homes at that time.
Well, that's true.
Right now, I mean, you can, one match could probably destroy, $100,000 worth of equipment like stereo and television, electronic. I mean, almost all the homes have those things now. The home itself probably isn't worth nearly so much as the content.
Well, you basically had just a straight dwelling policy. You insured so much on the dwelling, and you dictated what you wanted on your personal effects and things. You didn't have a homeowners, nothing like that.
Fred Allen and I were not good friends, but we were friends. And we had a mutual respect. And I used to work at the B&B store, which is right next door to that. And all the people from Allen Hartzell would come in there to buy their candy, or unfortunately cigarettes too. And I worked there, and Fred would come in every single day. And when I got out of the service then, I was making big money in the service. I was making $51 a month for about a year and a half, and then it went up to $78 a month. And then for the last 3 or 4 months or so, I got $105 a month. Well, I didn't have anything to spend it for, truthfully, because I got all of my room and board free, as you know, in the service. We were out in the middle of nowhere, so that you couldn't spend any money. And besides that, I wouldn't have spent it anyway, because you, Ruth, and I know that in those days, you just didn't have money to spend. When we were born during the Depression, it was very difficult to have money. And you made $75 a month.
That's right.
And I was making it, but you had to pay for everything. You had to pay for gasoline, for cars, well, if you lived for your parents, you didn't probably, but all of those things. That's what that came out of your $75. I didn't have anything to pay for when I was in the service. So I saved almost every penny that I had. And I went in to say hello to Fred Allen when I came back from the service, and I said, I'm going to go buy a car. I said, what are you going to get? And I said, well, I have a 54 Chevy in mind that I'm going to buy. He said, how much is it going to cost? And I said, it's going to cost $1,275, I think, or maybe it's $1,185. Anywhere, it's about $1,200. He said, don't pay for it cash. I said, why? He says, you're going to have to establish a credit line. You don't have any credit line because you've never bought it. We never bought anything on credit, never.
That's right.
Because if you had the money, you bought it. If you didn't, he talked me into it. I bought the car, and I started making payments. After the third payment, I went in, I can't stand this. So I paid it off. And he said, I can't make any money off you if you pay it off. But that's exactly what I did. And then I bought some property, a piece of little property, and I paid $300 for it. And the $299 were forgiven, and I paid $1 for it, and he did the transaction for me. I mean, that's what we did those days.
Sure.
And it was all done, over the counter. There were no forms to fill out. Here, this is yours. Tell us now, Toby, as you sit there and reflect upon your province, that is what you're doing right now, and try to put yourself into the shoes of Barney Coleman coming in 1919. What great differences do you notice in the sophistication level of what you have to do compared to what you knew that he had to do? Now, this is insurance-wise.
The basic thing that I noticed, the daily routine of our office is much more efficient today because of the computers. It allows us to make multiple copies of things very quickly, as opposed to having to have each one individually typed if you wanted 4 or 5 of the same thing.
And that's what they did. That's probably one of the reasons that Marge Geary was so good, because she has so much practice.
Sure.
And just things like your Xerox copy machines as opposed to the old mimeograph machines, those type of things. I think we still have the old mimeograph machine down our basement, to be honest with you.
It's a good place for it. But they were very valuable at the time.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Tell us, if you will, where they first started to make developments.
Well, Ruth might be a little better at that one, because when I came there, our real estate department was really finishing up their development areas. The big ones had been done. We were going into the Red Rock Winding Way area down in that area, but the area up on the north side of 261, the Highland
Heights.
Right, was pretty well finished at that point.
Can you remember any of those stories?
Not basically, no. I remember the areas and everything like that, and then...
Who was involved? Which human beings were involved?
Dick Krause, from day one, was involved.
And how did he do it? What did he do? Did he go up there and with his boots on, or what?
No, he was just out with the land and everything else. I just don't know what to tell you. All I know is he was an extremely good salesman.
Oh, Dick was a very good salesman. A good teacher, too.
Extremely good salesman, yeah.
Now, Dick was out there probably Building houses, selling houses, who was building them?
Well, that I don't know.
Harold Reese
That's right,
built a lot of them
Harold
for us
Reese.
that I'm aware of, Caesar.
Yes.
Al George was involved with
Al
some
George,
of the
Harold
construction
Reese, right.
for us.
Yeah.
Now, is Harold still with us?
Yes.
Okay,
Sure.
and Al is too. Now,
Boy, Harold will love hearing that comment.
yeah, he's still with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and he's doing a beautiful job of living. That's what.
And still building.
Still building,
Still
right.
very active in the building.
Right. I didn't. There was a Reese who passed away not too long ago, and I can't remember who that was. But that's why. And forgive me, Harold, for.
But Dick was very hands-on from what I remember with the
That's-
developments. He spent a
that's why
lot
I
of
asked about
time
the-
out there
Very
making
much,
sure that
yeah.
things were moving smoothly and coordinated with the home buyer and the builder.
The reason I asked about the boots is that there's a story about Dick Krause and his boots going out there. Now, Dick was a big athletic man, as you remember. Describe Dick in terms of stature. Or do you know him too, don't you?
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Describe him in terms of stature. How tall was he?
Oh, 6'2",
6'2",
yeah.
about my size, but much larger.
Very well built, very well built, very athletic.
Very.
And a personality that wouldn't quit. I never saw the man mad, never. And,
Another practical joker like
oh,
Russ.
yes, I would imagine he would be, but I
Used to
understand.
have lots of hair.
He did. He used to have lots of hair. Well, we all did, Ruth. We all did. At one time, I used to have a head. Used to have a head of hair that would fill a bushel basket. Now I have to have a bushel basket to hide my skull. This man, Dick Krause, as the story goes, had boots and would go up there and just. I mean, that's why he did things, and everyone respected him and really loved him, and he was able to sell. Now, do you remember, Toby, whether Alan Hartzell actually built the houses, then sold them, or they just pretty well negotiated it?
They were sold through our agency, from what I remember.
And no one else could build up there at the time, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. They were all built through our agency.
And at one time, let's say, what year was this? 45, 55, 60, somewhere in that area?
In the late 50s.
Okay, let's say 60. And one time, that was the area in Wadsworth, is that correct?
Absolutely.
And just out of curiosity, what did those houses go for?
I think if I recall, and I'm sure you'll get some corrections on this from people that probably bought them and still live in them, they were in the low 20s,
right.
19.9, 20.
That's right. That is correct. You're in the real estate business yet, right?
Yes, sir.
Sell that house today, how much?
Several times that. Yeah.
Couple $100,000.
Well, I don't think they'd go for that, but I mean, they've appreciated dramatically. It's still a nice area, a very nice neighborhood for families.
Oh, it's a beautiful neighborhood, absolutely gorgeous. Ruth used to drive up through there, did you not?
To which area? The Highland Heights?
Highland Heights.
Yes.
Tell us about what it looked like when the houses first went there, vegetation-wise.
There were no trees.
Not one
No,
tree.
no
Not
trees.
one tree.
No trees, yeah.
It was one great big expanse of houses with, you could see forever, because there were no trees there.
Right.
Nothing to stop the vision sight. Then what happened? Who did what?
Well, they put sidewalks in.
That was one big
Yeah.
thing that they did, which was
Put the
tremendously
sidewalk,
helpful.
yeah.
And then they started putting trees in.
trees and things
And the
like that,
Wadsworth had that at that time become a tree city kind of a place. And one of the things for which I will always be indebted to Wadsworth for is planting trees. I mean, when they first start planting them, I can remember they start planting them in Highland Heights, which was in the 50s. And 60s probably, they said, we'll never see those trees, because it takes so long. I was up there the other day, and you can't see House 2 because the trees are, and that's such a beautiful sight. Now, there were some other areas that Alan Hartzell developed. Where were they?
Well, the Red Rock area, which I've mentioned, back down through there, Allen Drive, Donor Drive area.
That's right, that's right. Tell us the problems that existed in the Allen Drive area.
Caesar, I don't really recall those because that was underway when I started with the agency. That
They had a
started in
swamp.
the early 70s.
Do you remember the swamp problems that you
No,
had there,
I
the
don't
water
remember.
problems? Oh, there was in the paper for months, and they finally got it corrected. There was a stream that went through there. Well, at one time, that was a swamp, and they had to build up on it. I don't know all of those details, but we'll find out, I'm sure, because there are people still living there who had the problems. Dick Krause, I'm sorry, not Dick Krause, Bill Snoke. Bill Snoke built a house up there. Where was it?
On Allen Drive.
Allen Drive. Was it the first house?
I don't think it was the first house.
But it was a
No.
beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
home. Just a beautiful home. As a matter of fact, then that became the place in Wadsworth to live. And how much did those houses go for?
Boy, that,
I really don't know. I remember Dick building a house a couple of doors up from Bill's, and Dick's burnt while it was under construction.
That's correct.
But I don't remember the price on those, but at that time, you would have to assume they'd been 30s, low 40s,
30s and
somewhere
40s,
in that
that's
area.
correct. Okay, now, have you built any houses within the past 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Oh, sure.
Where?
Various locations. We don't have any specific developments, but,
What do those houses go for?
well, most of the homes that are being built today are 150 area on up,
What's the most expensive one that you built recently?
probably 350. And there's a number of those around the area.
Ruth, let's go back to 1948. If someone would have said that you lived in a $350,000 house, what would you say?
I couldn't believe it.
You'd have to have an airplane to get from one end to the other.
That's right.
$350,000. The houses, as a matter of fact, if it's not too personal, probably the farm that you bought up there on Reimer Road didn't cost more than $10,000 or $12,000.
No, it didn't.
See?
No.
And that was a 75 or 100 acre farm, wasn't it?
53 acres.
53, I knew it wasn't 100 acres,
Yeah,
but
53.
53 acres, less than $10,000.
Right.
All of the land, all of the buildings, and then, you had all of the farmland there that made your living for you, and it cost less than $10,000. We have come a phenomenally long way in terms of prices, and certainly a long way in terms of the sophistication level of not only the industry. Tell us about just a wee little thing, and we'll have to hurry because we're going to run out of time very quickly, but tell us just very quickly some of the things that you remember, Ruth, in terms of liability in, what things people were suing or buying insurance for as compared to when you left in 1992.
Well, basically, it was just car insurance and house insurance.
That
You
was it.
didn't have anything else, no.
What about now?
Oh, now you have your personal liability, you got your
Umbrellas.
umbrella, personal umbrellas, and that type of thing.
Just has grown phenomenally. I remember when I first started teaching 40 some odd years ago, that we were encouraged to try to take out at least $1,000 policy for, incidentally, my very, very first liability policy I took out in Alan Hartzell.
Did you?
Yes, $1,000 policy, because you never can tell. You might be sued for $1,000.
Right.
You know what the policies are now?
Millions.
3, 4, 5, $10 million.
Yes.
And of course, it takes forever to pay for them as well. What are the other things that you would like to share about us in the last few minutes that we have here? Ruth, Toby, whoever wants to speak first, doesn't make much difference.
Just to take your last comment a little further, the thing I've noticed, even in the short period of time I've been in that agency, since '75, it used to be that people were more concerned about property issues. What about my car? What about my home? Now it is the liability side of things. Unfortunately, our society has evolved to that, and that's what their concerns are, losing what they have today and making sure that that is adequately protected from a liability standpoint, not necessarily from a fire or natural cause standpoint.
You've been in business for
22 years.
22 years. Soon it'll be 125 years. You're going to stay in business,
Absolutely.
and you're going to make this thing go to 150,
Caesar,
200 years.
I'm looking forward to continuing this agency as it has been through the last 122 years and hopefully being able to pass it on to someone that will continue it indefinitely.
Ruth and I are looking at you, and you're awfully young. It's going to be a long time before you have to pass it on.
That's
Well,
right.
hopefully.
A long time. Some of those people who passed it on to you were in their 80s when they did so. And of course they're gone now. And that'll happen to all of us, as we all know. But you have a long time to go, and we certainly want to wish you luck. We need to say at this time that We have come to the end of the hour. They go much too fast. And just quickly, Ruth, tell us some of the things that you want to tell us as we close our hour off.
All I can say, over the years that I worked there, it was a fabulous place to work for. And we left out one man that I thought was
Tell us.
Dean Eicher.
Dean Eicher, right.
Yes, he was a very sensitive man, too. Very sensitive to your needs in the office. I appreciated working there. It was terrific.
Ruth, the City of Wadsworth remembers you as being the stable person at Allen and Hartzell. They remember you as being the sensitive person at Allen Hartzell, and they remember you as being the helpful person at Allen Hartzell. Ruth, you have left a legacy in this community through Allen Hartzell that no one will forget, and we're so pleased and so grateful for that.
I appreciate that.
And we're going to say then at this point, as we say goodbye in this program today, that we hope and we know, Toby, that when you sit in Ruth's seat here 25 years from now, they'll say the same thing about you. Thank you for coming. It has been a pleasure having both of you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.